Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Zero Hour. And welcome to the future. That's always a good thought as we stand at the threshold of another year, of a new year. Welcome to the future. And it's always something that comes to mind when I pick up the newspaper and read a story like the story of the Sony hack, the hacking of Sony Studios, now according to the U.S. government, conducted by the government of North Korea. Now, there's a lot to be said about it, and I'm sure you've read about it already. Writer Alexis Madrigal had a good line when he tweeted out these words: "The only question about this story is whether it is from a William Gibson novel or an episode of Black Mirror." Now, Black Mirror, for those of you who haven't seen it, is on Netflix. It's a British science fiction show dealing with the way that the internet and new technology are changing our lives. And this story certainly is changing our lives. I guess the only other thing that the Sony hack could be, besides something out of a William Gibson novel or the Black Mirror series, is the plot of a mediocre buddy comedy, as I suspect the interview with Seth Rogen and James Franco probably is. But so let's try to unpack this story as well as we can, since this is the Zero Hour. This is the Zero Hour radio show. We are standing at the Zero Hour, the brink of transformative technology. Let's try to unpack this story as much as we can. Look, going back to the origin of this whole hack, which is that two guys known for making buddy pictures decide to make a comedy about the assassination. I don't know if you know this, but the assassination of an unnamed leader, or fictional leader. Somebody at the studio had the great idea: let's make it a little edgier. Let us make it actually about the current leader of North Korea. Use his name and his likeness. Well, okay, how'd that work out for you guys? I guess one of the things that comes to mind, now look, we all know that North Korea is a terrible dictatorship and an awful place to be, but just food for thought before we go any further. I don't think we'd take on it very kindly if a country that was hostile to us made a moronic laugh comedy about the assassination of our leader, who we do not have a cult around. But even so, the idea of laughing at the violent death of our leader probably wouldn't thrill a lot of people, especially now that we know that the interview depicted the blowing up of the head of Kim Jong-un, and that there was back and forth about how many pieces to show and all that. So there is that. I mean, the decency side of it. Still, we believe in freedom of expression on the Zero Hour. And now we learn, not only won't the interview be showing in theaters on December 25th, it won't even be available on digital. So what are we to make of this? Basically, we've had the complete suppression of what, and I use the term loosely with Seth Rogen movies, a work of art. I mean, that's serious. We have a work of art that's been completely suppressed because of cyber terrorism. Now, there were those who were pushing back on the idea that this is cyber terrorism when it was just a leak, because there was no violence involved. But clearly at this point, when people went to their desktop computers at Sony Studios and found a threat that said that there will be violence similar to that of 9/11, should this movie be shown in theaters on December 25th, the threat of violence, I think, does make it cyber terrorism and therefore terrorism. So, number one, we're at a moment of future shock. Future shock being that jarring sensation that the world is changing all around us. 9/11, for those of you who remember, that was a sense of future shock as well. Now this. So what kind of future shock will we see in the year to come, in 2015? I think I can already tell you something about the year after that, 2016, because if that year is dominated by news of a presidential election between a Bush and a Clinton, we will not have the shock of the future. We will have a back to the future year, and I'm not sure that the effect will be entirely pleasing to the nation. But coming back to 2015, what kind of strange stories are we going to be hearing in that year? For number one, I do not think the Sony hack story will be over by then. We really have some thinking to do as a nation about how we want to respond to this kind of aggression. Personally, I'm very very disturbed at the idea that we might, I don't want to use the word cave to terror because that sounds militaristic, but yeah, cave to terror. I mean, I think there is the threat that if we allow a movie to be completely suppressed out of fear, that only encourages this to be done over and over and over again by different parties. Now, I mean, the way to respond if a movie is offensive, if a movie is stupid, if a movie violates our values, whether it's an American movie or anyone else's, we have a way of addressing it. It's called free speech. If you don't believe in free speech, I think we really need to stop you in your tracks. So that's the Future Shock story number 1 for 2015, maybe the last one for 2014. I certainly hope so. But, let's take a minute too and think about the future in general. Should we be optimistic? Should we be pessimistic? Should we be worried? In this upcoming hour, we're going to talk to our friend Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, who has found a way to use the new technology of the internet and YouTube to communicate a progressive and yet fun and engaging message. We'll talk to Cenk about what he thinks will happen in the year to come. And I think that he's a good example of ways to use technology for us rather than using technology to manipulate or exploit us. That's number 1. Number 2, we'll be talking with programmer Nikki Case, who has developed what I consider to be an absolutely terrific program that teaches people about how prejudice really works, but does it with a game that's actually, kind of fun to play and is very, very good at explaining the ins and outs of neighborhood discrimination. So technology can be a force for good. Technology can be a force for evil. I guess I'll end with a story. I was trying to look it up before this today's program. Robert Hunter, who is a lyricist for the Grateful Dead, wrote a piece reflecting on, the heyday of the Grateful Dead in the early 70s and being in London, and the world was at his feet, and he had written or was about to write some of their best songs. And he ends it by saying, I don't think the world will ever be that good again, or my life will never be that good again, but it's a good memory or whatever. Look, as a writer, I respect him for telling his truth, but I'll tell you, as a human being who believes in change and improvement, I don't think any one of us has to believe that our best days are behind us. I think that whether you are 17 or 70, no matter who you are, next year can be better than this year. Every year can be better than the year that came before it. If we're lucky, if we work together, if we hang together, sure, we'll all face bad experiences. There will be tragedies, but on the whole, the world can get better if we choose to make it better. That's our mission here at the Zero Hour. That's why we report what we report, the way we report it. We hope you will stick with us as we do that. We will be back after this break with Cenk Uygur and Nikki Case. Stick with us. I'm Richard, RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour.